For decades, Central Asia and the South Caucasus were largely viewed as two separate regions. Today, that distinction is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. President Ilham Aliyev's state visit to Uzbekistan is another sign of that shift. Beyond the symbolism of close ties between Baku and Tashkent, the agenda has been highly practical. Trade, investment, energy, transport links across the Caspian and the future of the Middle Corridor. One of the strongest messages came from President Aliyev himself. Azerbaijan and Central Asia are increasingly becoming a single geopolitical and geo-economic region. But this story goes far beyond bilateral relations. As global trade routes are being reshaped and traditional geopolitical alignment are becoming more fluid, the space between Europe and Asia is gaining a new strategic importance. Hello, this is Inside Politics. I'm Anastasia Lavrina, and joining me now is Matthew Bryza, former US diplomat. Hi Matthew, and welcome to Inside Politics.
Hello Anastasia, happy to join you.
Great to have you today with us. So, President Mirziyoyev described President Aliyev's visit as historic, and the two leaders signed a treaty on eternal friendship. But relations between Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan have developed with remarkable speed in recent years. So what has changed strategically? Why has Azerbaijan become so important for Uzbekistan now, beyond the obvious historical and cultural ties between the two countries?
Well, I think it's not that Azerbaijan only has become important to Uzbekistan. I think Uzbekistan has become important to Azerbaijan as well. Like any strategic partnership, or as National Security Advisor Hikmet Hajiev called it, a strategic alliance, it has to work in both directions. And so what has changed is, number one, Russia is incredibly weakened by its war of choice in Ukraine and is unable to exert its influence, especially in Uzbekistan, as it used to do, which provided a break on relations between Uzbekistan and its neighboring countries. A second thing that has happened is that Azerbaijan itself has grown so confident, and it exerts positive energy throughout its region and beyond now as an actor of geopolitical significance, whether it's exporting natural gas to Syria now to help stabilize that country's economy after the overthrow of the brutal Assad regime, or hosting diplomatic talks a year and a half ago or so between the foreign ministers of Syria and Israel, or its joining of the C5+1 consultative discussions. And of course, it's, as President Aliyev has said, its existence in a state of de facto peace with Armenia after the meetings that he, President Aliyev, and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia had with President Trump a year ago on August 8th. So Azerbaijan sees a great strategic moment to seize the initiative and become a real regional actor of significance, and Uzbekistan welcomes that as a doubly landlocked country that needs access to friends and to markets around the world.
Matthew, what is indeed very interesting. I asked you about bilateral relations, and you touched so many countries at the same time, simultaneously. Let's say C5+1, United States, even the Syria, meaning that the development of the partnership between Baku and Tashkent has a great importance, not only for two countries, but for two regions as well, the Caspian region, Central Asia, and the South Caucasus. And it's indeed very interesting when the President Aliyev made a particularly significant statement in Tashkent describing Azerbaijan and Central Asia as increasingly forming a single geopolitical and geo-economic region. This is much bigger idea than bilateral cooperation between Baku and Tashkent. So Matthew, from a geopolitical perspective, are we actually seeing the boundaries between the South Caucasus and Central Asia beginning to disappear symbolically? And if so, what does that change in the water balance of power across Eurasia?
I think we are, and this is something that the United States has long encouraged, going back to the early 1990s. And I got my introduction to that fantastic part of the world In the mid-1990s, when President Bill Clinton decided the United States had an interest in helping the countries of the greater Caspian region access global markets. And, that ended up happening through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil and the South Caucasus natural gas pipelines. And now that whole process has accelerated. We see Washington being more active than it has been since then, since the days of President Clinton, and even more so. I'm in the private investment world now, and my firm is very interested in bringing capital from a lot of investors into Azerbaijan and the Central Asian region, especially Uzbekistan, to build on this positive momentum. This as you put it, Anastasia, erasing of the psychological and also the physical and economic gaps previously, essentially formed by the Caspian Sea between South Caucasus and Central Asia. Now the Caspian Sea will increasingly become a connector of those regions. And, President Aliyev deserves enormous credit for this. So does President Mirziyoyev, who for the last few years has been advocating exactly this. He's been saying that, again, as a double landlocked country, Uzbekistan needs to have reliable transit routes with reliable partners in multiple directions. And they're seizing the opportunity now to chart their own independence, free from any outside interference, in a way that Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, as well as the other countries in Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan, have never had the opportunity previously to do. This is a golden moment for all of those countries, and Armenia as well.
Matthew, please correct me if I'm made any mistake, but I do remember I read a very interesting book where it was particularly stated that for the United States, after the Soviet Union collapsed, 3 countries on the post-Soviet space the United States paid a particularly important significance for its independent and progressive development for the future, and that was Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan. So now, so many years after, could we explain the particular significance United States paid attention to these countries that time, and what changed so many years after?
Well, I don't know which book you mean, but Zbigniew Brzezinski, one of my all-time greatest intellectual heroes, used to wrote that Azerbaijan was the fulcrum in that region, the country where so many other interests revolved and would be decided. And so, I've been a U.S. diplomat from 1989 through 2012, and throughout that period, it was just as the Berlin Wall had fallen, the Iron Curtain was gone, and all of these countries, your countries, were becoming independent. Throughout that period, they were all important, all of them being sovereign and independent and being safe and secure and stable and having their territorial integrity respected was a top objective of the United States. Now, in terms of raw strategic interests, however, of course, Azerbaijan was at the top of the list because of its oil and gas, but also because of its tolerant society, especially after September 11th, 2001. A tolerant society that has a Shiite majority, but a secular society. That was a big deal after the terrorist attacks against the United States, as were the transit routes via Azerbaijan and then across Central Asia into Afghanistan. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan were always of importance too, A, simply because of their size, and B, because of their natural resources and big economies. And of course, Ukraine was always special. The United States had a special obligation under the Budapest Memorandum of 1994 to safeguard Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as, by the way, did Russia, which Russia has invading Ukraine twice. And so, Ukraine did that. Or I should say acquired those obligations from us in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons. So the United States, from the very beginning of the end of the Soviet Union, also felt it had a special obligation to Ukraine.
Well, Matthew, Uzbekistan's support for Azerbaijan has also taken a very tangible form in Karabakh. At the initiative of President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, Uzbekistan built the Mirzo Ulugh School in Fizuli region, one of the first major social facilities contributed by a foreign country to the reconstruction of the liberated territories. How has Uzbekistan engagement in Karabakh strengthened the broader relationship between Baku and Tashkent? And looking ahead, how could the opening of, let's say, Zangezur corridor, or TRIP as it's being called, add a new strategic dimension to that partnership, particularly by creating more direct links between Central Asia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey?
Yeah, well, those are a couple of questions. Number one, in terms of the school in Fizuli, which I've had the honor to visit since the Great Return has begun, that's a beautiful gesture by Uzbekistan, and it reflects a sensibility of the region, of sort of the both humility and the human care for brothers and sisters throughout the greater Caspian region, regardless of what country they happen to be citizens of. I think that meant a lot to President Aliyev. I know that for the Great Return and the reconstruction of the previously occupied areas to be a great success, Azerbaijan needs that sort of support from all of its friends. And so I think President Aliyev probably viewed that beautiful gesture of the school as a sign of true, not just geopolitical commitment, but human and emotional commitment by President Mirziyoyev and Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan and President Aliyev. Second question is about the Middle Corridor, which includes the Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity across Armenia, and then its extension through rail linkages like you're showing on screen now, and roads and fiber cables and electricity cables. That whole set of projects, of course, will be critical to the rebuilding of Azerbaijan's previously occupied areas, but much more, it'll be significant in a broad geopolitical sense to giving Armenia a chance to develop as a successful country and to integrate itself and Azerbaijan as its potential future partner into the greater global economy, and to provide the crucial transit links between the Far East, across Central Asia, the Caspian Sea, and then the South Caucasus and into Turkey and beyond. So this is an amazing geostrategic moment. I was in Washington, D.C. two times in the past 3 weeks, meeting with very senior officials, and there I felt such a deep and strong commitment to helping Azerbaijan and the other countries realize these infrastructure and transportation links to provide a foundation for a stable and lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I'm thrilled, as I said before, to be able to play a part of this now, not just as a geopolitical, let's say, observer and analyst, but as an active investor as well.
Well, that's very interesting. So, absolutely, the Dangdizur corridor itself, or the Trip corridor, will benefit not only Armenia and Azerbaijan, but as it was mentioned many times, it was stated by the President Ilham Aliyev that it can benefit the region itself. And if connectivity through the South Caucasus expands further, including through Nakhchivan, Central Asia states could gain additional routes towards Turkey and European markets. Could a more connected South Caucasus fundamentally change Central Asia's economic geography and, by extension, its geopolitical choices?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's massive investment coming into and looking at critical minerals in all the Central Asian countries. I mean, especially in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, but also in Tajikistan, as well as Kyrgyzstan, where there are important deposits of antimony. But there are other minerals. I mean, Turkmenistan, besides natural gas and oil, has enormous amounts of lithium. And so providing new transport links and logistical links for all those countries to global markets will absolutely change the geopolitics of the extended region, because for the first time in centuries or ever, they will be free from external interference certainly by Russia. They have to figure out how to manage their relations with China, and they're trying to do so with China as an economic partner. And they've got the United States and Europe standing by and ready to facilitate these processes. And in the case of the U.S. under the Trump administration, the readiness to invest a lot of U.S. government money, which then will unlock private money as well. So yes, absolutely, Anastasia. These new transit links open up a new geopolitical future for the countries of Central Asia, but also for Azerbaijan and Armenia and hopefully Georgia as well, if its government decides to participate in all of these projects.
All right. One particularly interesting idea discussed during the visit was the development of a joint shipping fleet on the Caspian and a more integrated transport route that would move cooperation from simply using existing infrastructure towards jointly building and managing connectivity. How significant will that be, and could this eventually give Uzbekistan a much more direct stake in the infrastructure connecting Central Asia to the South Caucasus?
Yeah, a huge change for Uzbekistan. Already a few times I've mentioned President Mirziyoyev's determination to provide double landlocked Uzbekistan multiple transit links. And, the most desirable one is westward toward European markets and beyond, North America. So, the ship building process of the joint Caspian fleet is a huge development. The Caspian is in severe shortage of cargo ships and other ships to cross the Caspian. That project work, of course, a Caspian littoral state will have to be involved, right? Because Uzbekistan doesn't have a Caspian coastline, so that means Turkmenistan and or Kazakhstan. So that project in itself, while announced between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan, is also going to, by definition, involve Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan as well. So that's great news for regional connectivity.
What's interesting about the emerging cooperation is that it's becoming strategically important without developing into a conventional security alliance. Can Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan build meaningful security cooperation without creating a military bloc? And what could that cooperation realistically include? Let's say cybersecurity, border management, protection of infrastructure, intelligence, or defense industry cooperation?
Of course, all of those things. The answer is absolutely yes. The European Union is not a security organization. The Organization of Turkic States is not a security organization. And this partnership between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan need not have any security elements whatsoever. They have so much to offer each other and the world in terms of economic cooperation. And yes, definitely in all those areas you mentioned. And water management is crucial to all the countries of Central Asia. Both the landlocked ones, which have such scarcity of water, but also especially the Caspian ones, because as we all know, the Caspian Sea's level is decreasing, and that's creating all sorts of environmental and economic / transportation challenges and severe problems as well. So cooperation on water management is absolutely crucial.
Well, but as economic activity across the Caspian grows, does the strategic value and vulnerability of ports, undersea infrastructure, energy links, and shipping, it's also being somehow affected and attracting more attention? Are governments paying enough attention to the security dimension of this expansion? And could protection of critical infrastructure in and around the Caspian become the next major area of regional cooperation? If not Europe, not the United States, then the countries themselves should be responsible for this, right?
Oh, they should be that, and I've long advocated that they work together on also environmental security and protecting the Caspian Sea. Russia talks a big talk about how it wants no outside country to have any security presence in the Caspian Sea. That's fair enough, but then the maritime security of the Caspian countries themselves must be protected and not be threatened by Russia. As we were saying in the beginning, Russia has sufficient problems right now it's facing that it created itself in Ukraine not to be able to cause much trouble in the Caspian today. Same goes for Iran, but tomorrow, who knows? So yes, I agree with you. It's high time for all the countries of the greater Caspian region, even the ones that are not littoral states like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, to work together on security. And this need not be security aimed at creating threats for any other countries, but working together to make sure these transit routes that are increasingly important to a wide range of markets are protected and can operate according to market-based rather than monopolistic principles.
Matthew, we often discuss Eurasia through the strategies of major powers. China, what China wants, what Russia wants, what the United States or Europe wants. But perhaps the Azerbaijan-Uzbekistan relationship points to something different. Regional states increasingly building their own networks horizontally. Are we entering a period in which the future architecture of Eurasia will be shaped not only by great powers competition, but increasingly by the choices and partnership of the countries located between those powers?
Yes, of course we are. That's been sort of a recurring theme of my last few responses. This is the moment for the countries of Central Asia and the South Caucasus to seize their own destinies. President Putin can't do anything to stop them. The United States wants to support them. China's looking for partnerships as well. Iran doesn't know what to do. Now is the time to run through this opening as fast as you can and seize all of these opportunities and, yes, create your own future, you being the countries of, let's just say, the greater Caspian region. Now is the moment. And as the countries, as you all do this, Russia will have no choice over time but to become a partner that can benefit from all of these positive changes as well.
Matthew, and one last question about the geopolitical global changes, let's say, taking into account what is now being, what is happening today in the Middle East between United States and Iran, and taking into account all of those points you mentioned, answering my questions about the U.S. interests in the region. From your experience, from your understanding of the situation, what else should they expect from Washington towards the Caspian region, Central Asia, and the South Caucasus?
More of the same. When I was in Washington, I heard a strengthening commitment to, again, promoting investment in all of the projects you and I have just discussed. And what I also heard from the West Wing of the White House, or in the West Wing of the White House, is President Trump himself is personally committed to helping all these countries develop their critical minerals and get them to global markets. A, because their stability, their prosperity, their independence is an interest in itself of the United States, but B, because the United States, of course, wants access to diversified supplies of these critical minerals that can reach the U.S. and the markets of the friends of the United States safely and reliably.
Well, Matthew, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining Inside Politics today.
Thanks, Anastasia. It was fun and it was an honor, as always. Great questions.
Thank you. So, what we're seeing between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan is part of a much bigger transformation. Central Asia and the South Caucasus are no longer simply regions between larger powers. They are increasingly trying to shape their own connections, diversify their partnerships, and define their own place in a changing Eurasian order. And as new transport routes, energy links, and economic partnerships emerge, geography itself is acquiring a new political meaning. Azerbaijan's growing engagement with Central Asia places it directly at the center of that conversation. Thanks all for this edition of Inside Politics, and thank you for watching A News. See you next time.